thank you for making your way out here. We booked Metro Hall, but obviously Metro Hall was too small for this proposal. And that says volumes. That says volumes about the underestimation of people do on a regular basis of the power of the citizen and the power of the residents. So I want you guys to give yourself a round of applause, please. Thank you for your support. My name is Anshul Kapoor, and I'm suffering from a cold. I'm a resident of Toronto, a proud Torontonian. I grew up in Brampton, Mississauga, but whenever I traveled, I never said Brampton, Mississauga. I always said Toronto. And even in Toronto, when I came to Toronto to party, I'm the 905er that came in on weekends. I said, hey, where are you from? Well, I'm from Toronto, man. Whereabouts in Toronto? Well, just around the corner, about that way. I'm also the chair of NoJetsTO, this evening that was put together. But before we begin, that's us. I want to show a quick prophecy that was made exactly 10 years ago.
Kennedy is a veteran of waterfront battles and warns that airport expansion will bring jets to the downtown waterfront.
No matter what they tell you, and I've seen this happen 100 times, no matter what they tell you now, no matter what assurances, guarantee that if you build it, it will come, and it will be jets.
Kennedy is a veteran of waterfront battles
so what you
and
didn't
warns
see,
that airport
what you did
expansion
hear
will bring jets to the
was
downtown waterfront.
Robert Kennedy Jr. in 2003 for Mayor Miller's campaign. He predicted it. He predicted that if you build it, jets will come. And we ignored that prophecy. Well, we didn't. Toronto, the elected officials, those who are proponents of this proposal, ignored that proposal. This proposal is absurd to begin with. To build a jet port on your prime waterfront land is absurd. To ignore 17 million visitors that come to the waterfront on a yearly basis is absurd. But apparently absurdity is rampant and who we deal with on a regular basis. Not only is the proposal short-sighted, selfish, and not in the best interest of Toronto as a whole, but we forget that the current iteration of the airport has its issues and it needs to be dealt with. That's what we need to focus on. In the last 3 years, this airport has grown over 138%, and there has been no mitigation of that growth and the impact on not only on the community, but also Toronto as a whole of that growth. Issues such as traffic congestion, pollution, safety concerns, the amount of public funding required to maintain and update the infrastructure to support this airport. All of these concerns have now been confirmed by the city staff report, and I thank them for their due diligence and the hard work that they put in. And also the Board of Health. I don't know if you've heard, but the Board of Health, just about an hour ago, voted unanimously to ask City Council to vote against this expansion. We thank them for their tireless efforts to stand up and be the advocates for sense and sensibility. Now, our door-to-door canvassing shows that Torontonians are against this expansion. From Bluffs to Mimico to Waterfront to North York, we have found supporters, and those are you guys. It's clear. We had a small room in Metro Hall, and we had to grow in the last minute to find out, where do we fit 500 people who wish to come here? So that's why we picked this. You will hear the subway going across from time to time. We picked that on purpose so that we want to make sure that noise is not the only issue. We will get by that. There's other issues at hand that we need to focus on. Now, we digress. They deferred the vote by 4 weeks. 4 weeks. The city staff is not going to be doing any incremental work in 4 weeks. So what happens in those 4 weeks? What happens is that Porter Airlines and their lobbyists and their advertising dollars get 4 more weeks. Already, they're putting advertising in every single newspaper. They're on radio. I'm shocked they're not on television, but I'm sure if they could afford it, they will be there as well. And that's all we have gotten in those 4 weeks. So the fact is, what we need to focus on is that the deferral is a win for us. We won. It's a small victory, but we won. And it's clear that they're scared. The Board of Health came out and said no because this proposal doesn't make sense. The city staff asked for more time because they also know this proposal doesn't make sense. But I'll continue on rambling for 2 hours, but I won't take your time because you're not here to listen to me. We have, as you know, a very distinguished group of Torontonians participating tonight. I know you would like to applaud them all as I announce them, but I ask you, in essence of time, please hold your applause till everyone has been introduced. Our panel will be moderated tonight by journalist John Lawrence. Wave. John is probably well-known to most of the people in this room. He's been writing about urban issues since 1995, the time when I was in Brampton but calling myself a Torontonian. He's a senior editor and columnist for Spacing Magazine. He also writes for Walrus Magazine, the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, the Canadian Business. He's an author of several books, including The New City, which was chosen as the Globe and Mail Best 100 Books in 2006. He's currently working on an anthology about the ward. Now, the ward was the neighborhood, a slum, really, where our current city hall now stands. The ward was home to waves of new immigrants to the city throughout the 19th century and into 1930s. On to our panel. Mr. Paul Bedford. He worked in the city planning department of the City of Toronto for 31 years, 8 of them as senior chief city planner. I'm sure I got that label wrong, but I apologize. According to my count, now that means that he worked effectively for 6 different mayors. So that's Mayor Crombie, Mayor Sewell, Mayor Eggleton, Mayor Hall, Mayor Lastman, and of course Mayor Miller. Thank you. During his career with the City of Toronto, he was a tireless advocate for accessing public transit, for sensible application of basic principles of sound urban planning, and for city building initiatives, which he continues to fight for today. Thank you for him being here. Since his so-called retirement in 2004, he's been appointed adjunct professor at the University of Toronto and Ryerson School of Planning. He serves on the Waterfront Toronto Urban Design Review Panel. He served 2 years on the Greater Toronto Transportation Authority, now Metrolinx, and was recently appointed vice chair of the Transit Investment Strategy Advisory Panel by Premier Kathleen Wynne. Paul Bedford is also a member of CAMH Redevelopment Committee and the Advisory Committee of the National Capital Commission in Ottawa. Mayor David Crombie. Mayor David Crombie was mayor of Toronto from 1972 to 1978. Mayor Crombie was the first Toronto mayor to come out of the urban reform movement of the 60s and 70s, a movement largely inspired by the ideas of Jane Jacobs, who we all know was a strong opponent to this airport. During this time at the City Hall, the city turned away from a full speed ahead development in favor of more community consultation and improving social services. Mayor Crombie then went on to be in federal politics as a member of Brian Mulroney's cabinet. After leaving federal politics, Mayor Crombie headed up the Royal Commission on the future of waterfront, or on Toronto's waterfront. Now, Royal Commission is what set the groundwork for Waterfront Toronto, which now spearheads the development of this area. He's recently retired from his position as CEO, Canadian Urban Institute, and we are extremely honored to have him with us tonight. And now he serves his time serving organizations such as ours. So thank you, sir. Mr. Jack Diamond. He is one of the country's most accomplished architects, an urban thinker. He has been called a style icon. I will take some notes later. And his work can be seen in skylines around the world, as well as right here in Toronto. His work is all around us. The Central YMCA, Osgoode Hall, the Four Seasons Performing Arts Center are just a few. His work can also be seen around the world. The new Mariinsky Theater in St. Petersburg, the Harmon Center for the Arts in Washington, the Jewish Community Center in Manhattan, and Jerusalem City Hall are just a few of his well-known projects. Jack Diamond was one of the 5 commissioners of recently released Golden Report, which made recommendations on the governance, taxation, land use, and transportation for the Greater Toronto Area. And last, and absolutely not least, is Jane Fairburn. As a Toronto lawyer, Jane Fairburn has many years lived at or near the North Shore of Lake Ontario. She has devoted years of researching the history, geography, and the people of Toronto's shoreline. One result of that research is this guy, this remarkable book, and it's called Along the Shore, Rediscovering Toronto's Waterfront Heritage. It's a beautiful book. It's a timely reminder of all that we stand to lose. Today, Jane Fairburn lives in Scarborough Bluffs, as I mentioned, one of the areas that will be affected by this expansion. Now you can clap. Thank you. Before we hand our proceedings over to John and to our panel, we just want to have a few words from a man who really needs little introductions, and especially little introduction in this room. If there were ever a proud Torontonian, it is this man. We were humbled when he accepted our invitation to say a few words to kickstart this evening. His administration foresaw this day. They predicted it. The campaign that you saw earlier was part of that. One of the signature achievements of his mayoralty, I always struggle with that word, was the cancellation of the proposed $22 million bridge to the island airport. The reason it was canceled is because this is the day that they would have seen a long time ago. Throughout the years in his politics, he's fought for a revitalized waterfront, exactly what we are standing here to do and exactly what we're fighting for. We need a Toronto where Torontonians can live, work, and play. And today he continues his advocacy for the environment as President and CEO of World Wildlife Federation of Canada. I would like to welcome former Mayor David Miller.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that very warm welcome, but more importantly, for being here tonight and for engaging actively in this fight, because when you do, it's a fight you can win, and what's more, I think it's a fight we must win. So thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause for your tremendous hard work and advocacy. I just came tonight to make 2 points, and I'll be brief because we've got a really distinguished panel, and I know we're looking very much forward to what they have to say, and I want to acknowledge and thank the panelists for their leadership in this city as well. All 4 of them have led tremendously in very different but important ways. The first point I want to make is that filling in our lake to run jets out of downtown Toronto and create an airport that has more traffic than the City of Ottawa Airport is absolutely unacceptable, and it's wrong, and it must be stopped, and you're going to make it be stopped. I think we all know why it's wrong, but it's important to list the reasons. It's wrong environmentally. And just ask people who live near the airport what they see today from the residue of the planes and everything else. Just ask them, and they'll tell you what it's like there. It's wrong environmentally. It's wrong environmentally to pave over our lake. Who rationally would suggest that we should be paving over beautiful Lake Ontario right in front of downtown Toronto if it was disconnected from this airport? People would think you were crazy. We shouldn't be paving over our lake. It's wrong for people. It's wrong for people in the neighborhood. You know, Waterfront Toronto says that there will be over 1,715 cars per hour. Where else in the city of Toronto would people allow over 1,700 cars an hour to drive right by a school and community center? Well, nowhere. It's absolutely unacceptable. It's unsafe. It brings its own environmental hazards. It's simply wrong. It's wrong from another perspective. And you'll hear much more about this from the panel. But we're in the midst of a waterfront revitalization that is really where the future jobs in our city will be created. Not 500 jobs, not 1,000 jobs, tens of thousands of jobs. It's like 6 Canary Wharf projects. And the moment you allow jets, it puts all of that at incredible risk for safety reasons, for planning reasons, for practical reasons like construction, and for the fact that lots of industries, like the film industry and television industry, can't be in the flight paths of jets. It puts our economic future and the future of our waterfront at risk. And one more thing, which in one way I always thought was most important. The Toronto Island's a gem. We're lucky to have incredible green space right off our city in the lake, particularly as downtown develops. We need more and more green space, not less. And who uses that green space the most? It's not actually the people who live on the island, the small number of people who help keep it safe. It's not even the people who live in the condominiums on the waterfront. It's people from all over Toronto, particularly from Northeast Scarborough and Northwest Etobicoke, who use Toronto Island as their summer cottage. They come there in droves. Everyone's seen it. The ferries are absolutely packed with people loving the island, with their families for picnics, for fun, because that's in the summer where they go. They don't go to Muskoka. They certainly don't fly out of the island airport to Mount Tremblant. They use the island as their park, their backyard, and their cottage. And that's far more valuable in a built-up city like ours than a tiny bit of convenience for a few people who want to spend a few less minutes getting to the airport, particularly when in about a year and a half there'll be a train to the airport from downtown, and that convenience argument will be completely gone. So that's the first thing I want to say. There is no real argument for this. The second thing I want to say is don't let them tell you you can't stop it. We know we can. We know in Toronto that when we organize and we're right, and we work with people in Scarborough, and we work with people on Etobicoke, people who live in the waterfront, people who live up north, they understand the issue. When people reach out and work together, we actually can stop these kinds of island airport expansions, because it's happened twice. In 1935, a man who wanted to be mayor, Sam McBride, was instrumental in stopping the tunnel to the island airport. And in 2003, tens of thousands of people in Toronto got together and we stopped the bridge to the island airport, which would have facilitated far worse expansion than this. And we can do it again. We can do it again. And I know we can do it again, not just because that happened to be the second day of my mayoralty on December 3rd, 2003, which I happen to remember rather well, but because throughout that campaign, we had over 76 debates. At every single debate, one of the other candidates said, you can't do it. You can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it. Well, we can. We have allies. We have allies like City Councillor Adam Vaughan, who's right here in the front row. We have allies like former Mayor David Crombie, who is far more perfect than I. We have allies like some of the best minds in planning and architecture like Paul Bedford and Jack Diamond. And we have allies all across this city. We're making a huge difference right now. We can continue to do it. by simply explaining to Torontonians what's at stake. Do we want to pave over the waterfront to save people 5 minutes? Literally. No, we don't. Do we want to preserve beautiful green space for families across this city, particularly those who can't afford a cottage in Muskoka? Yes, we do. And by being here tonight, I know you're committed to this cause, but I just ask you, if NoJetsTO asks you to do something, please help out. Please canvass. Please knock on doors all over the city. Please send emails. Please show up at council. Please support people like Councillor Adam Vaughan. Please support your neighbors. And let's say NoJetsTO. Thank you very much and enjoy the evening. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Miller. And without further ado, I'll pass it on to John Lawrence, who will continue with the panel. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Mayor Miller for speaking. The great thing about being a journalist is you always get to talk after the politicians. And I can confirm that he was very happy that day because I was sitting in the, he's still here, and I was sitting in the cafeteria at City Hall, and there was a break from that council meeting, and he suddenly like plunked down at my table, like big grin on his face, and his PR person, Andrea Dario, sort of left him in my charge for a few minutes, and I wasn't quite sure what to do with somebody who was that thrilled. Okay, so I'll let me just sort of tee up the rest of the evening, and we can get going. So each of the four panelists who you've been introduced to will talk for a couple minutes. I'm going to ask them a couple of questions, and then a little bit later we'll throw it open to questions from the audience. So when we get to the question and answer period, I would ask for questions, not speeches. I'm a reporter and I interrupt people for a living, so I will interrupt you if you make a speech. And I might interrupt them if they keep going for too long. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to ask, I'm going to go from left to right, so I'll ask Jane Fairburn to begin with her presentation.
Thanks very much, John. Can everybody hear me okay? No. Okay. How's that? Okay, folks, thanks. For more than a decade, I've focused my energies on writing about the Toronto waterfront through the lens of 4 communities in Toronto that are still connected to the lake and the natural world. So those communities are the Toronto Island in the center of the city, the lakeshore from Humber Bay over to Etobicoke Creek in the west, and in the east, the beach and the Scarborough Bluffs. And through the telling, what I hope has happened is that the story of the Toronto shore has emerged as a singular entity. What have I learned through this process? I've learned many things, not the least of which is that the Toronto waterfront is an integrated whole, connected from ancient times, both geologically, archaeologically, and historically, from the Rouge River to Etobicoke Creek. I've learned that for more than 10,000 years, complex groups of people, plants, animals, and aquatic life have occupied this shore and the nearshore waters and the rivers and creek mouths that lead down to the water's edge, and that this unique and fragile ecosystem is inherently deserving of our protection. I've also learned the value of institutional memory, that people who live in the communities outlined in the book have historically acted as stewards of the waterfront and continue to do so in the present day. And I've also learned that oppositions to plans that would destroy the waterfront and those communities are most effectively pursued at the local level with direct citizen participation. And I tell those stories in the book. Organizations like Tonight is an example of that direct citizen participation. Make no mistake, folks, the introduction of jets at the island airport will bring airport expansion. And airport expansion is antithetical to the continuous, harmonious, and mixed-use waterfront that is developing downtown and in fact does exist in other areas of the city today. With expansion, serious risks to human health and the ability to use the waterfront come, and these issues affect to varying degrees all areas of the waterfront, whether you live in the Bluffs as I do, or the beach, or Mimico, or in fact downtown. So rather than just thinking about the viability of the jets and their impact on the waterfront, let's allow ourselves the luxury of asking the bigger question. What kind of waterfront do we want going forward into the 21st century? I, for one, would like to see a lakefront where the fabulous work of Waterfront Toronto continues, where all Torontonians, regardless of where they live, consider themselves inhabitants of a great waterfront city, and where we have a waterfront where we can live, work, and play at the water's edge. So rather than focusing on the convenience of hopping on a jet to the Caribbean or taking a streetcar to LA, let's go big. Let's create a waterfront where the world wants to come to us. And now that's an economic opportunity that the city of Toronto might find a little bit difficult to turn down. Thanks very much.
So, Paul.
Everybody hear me all right? Okay, I'm going to focus obviously on the planning side of this and I make a few basic comments. And David took me back to December 3rd of 2003. Some of you were in the council chamber when I stood up for the first time as the chief planner and stated my planning views, why I was opposed to the fixed link. And I said to council, it's the wrong thing to do. You don't need to bring your car over there to catch a flight. But more important, I reminded council of this, and I said, but be careful. Monitor the growth of that airport over the next 10 plus years, because it will get out of hand and it will create huge impacts that will be very, very difficult to deal with. Well, that day has come. So given that reality that we're all here about, I would say this: the focus of good city planning is usually about providing solutions to current problems and developing ideas for the future. You have to do both. And we have an opportunity here to do exactly that, because we have existing problems, as we all know already. We don't have to think about the future, because it'll only get worse. So with that in mind, I've got 5 points I want to put on the table. These are the questions that council has to answer, because they're going to make a 100-year decision if they allow this expansion. First, balance. The waterfront is key because no one use dominates. It has a mix of a wide variety of activities. We all know what they are, so I won't go into those in detail now. The second issue is scale, size, and the ground operations associated with the airport. It's already creating huge conflicts. If it grows to the 4.3 million passengers, those problems will be exacerbated in a huge way. To give credit to Porter, we all know they've built a niche airline which services what I call the briefcase set. It doesn't serve the vacation traveler. Totally different implications that I'll talk about a little later this evening. The third point I want to make is that this is more than just the noise issue. And I want to caution everybody, don't just focus on the noise. It's real for sure, but there are many other conflicts, many other impacts, both on Bathurst Quay and for implications for the central waterfront that we have to address. One of the things that it shocked the hell out of me, frankly, was the proposal actually to demolish the Harbourfront School and Community Center to make way for parking. Like, how insane is that? The fourth point, the planning policy framework. I'm very proud of this. 2 things we did when I developed the official plan for the amalgamated city. One of them was put in specific policy number 194. It's in my brain. It requires the airport operations to comply with the tripartite agreement, and that improvements to the airport's facilities have no adverse impact on the surrounding community. I deliberately put that test into the official plan. That test has to be met. The second planning framework that I think is relevant is something else I was proud of developing, the Central Waterfront Secondary Plan, many of you know, called Making Waves. It was different because it was a principles plan, and it had 4 core principles. the council adopted under Mel Lastman unanimously, which never happens at City Council. And here they are. The first, removing barriers and making connections. The second principle, building networks of spectacular waterfront parks and public spaces. The third was promoting a clean and green environment. And the fourth was to create a dynamic and diverse communities across our waterfront. Council embraced those unanimously. So my question for Council is, why in God's name, just 10 years later, would you substitute that unanimous public vision for a private vision? Doesn't make any sense. The very last point I want to make is perhaps the most important in my view, and that's what I call loss of control over the future of our waterfront. We only have one waterfront, and if we let it run away from us and get destroyed in this process, we will never go backwards. There's no opportunity to do that. Here's my concern. If the runways are expanded and jets are allowed, I guarantee you there will be other airlines that want to be there, and there will be more jets and more competition. And the whole implication of people wanting to fly to Florida with their kids for Disney World for a week and all the luggage that goes with that, all those operations are totally different than the briefcase set group. And I think that if that ever happens, we will run up against incredibly powerful market forces that will frankly make City Council almost impossible to control the future expansion of that airport. That's what concerns me most. So that's why this is critical, and I'll have more to say later.
Mayor Crombie.
Thank you very much. Following Paul reminds me that following a planner is always helpful. I had 2 points, and Paul mentioned both of them. So let me underline and underscore what Paul really meant to say. The reason that I am opposing this application to expand the airport is that it repudiates a fundamental principle that has animated all of the good planning and development on the waterfront in the past number of years. And that principle is that it's to be multi-use, and it's to be in balance, and no use should dominate. It may sound like it's 30,000 feet in the air to put a principle out like that, but that's what the work that Paul and others had done over the years to make sure that as the waterfront developed, that principle was at its center, that there should be a balance, no use should dominate. The proposal to expand to 4,800,000 passenger loads a year is a doubling of the current use, And as Paul mentioned, it just exceeds the amount of passenger load in the international airport in Ottawa. Now, that is why, and by the way, the international airport in Ottawa is the 6th largest airport in the country. That is why this proposal does not in any way, shape, or form accord with the principles of the waterfront central waterfront secondary plan that everybody works so hard to not only build, but to implement. And secondly, it is the reason why it is not supported by Waterfront Toronto, who are charged with implementing that plan. The second point, touched on by Paul as well, is that much of the discussion you hear, read, and so on, is about Porter. This is not, in my judgment, about Porter. This is about the waterfront. And it's important to understand that I'm going to say something nice about Porter, and I don't want to offend anybody here. I mean that because I think it is important. There are people who like Porter. It's convenient. It's a niche airline that people use. And believe me, there are people at City Hall, elected to council, whose constituents tell them that. So when it comes to turning their heads about where they should vote, it is important we understand that Porter is not the enemy. To me, it isn't. The enemy, of course, is the assumption that we can now move forward in a way that is going to offend that principle. And it's clear to me that now we are going to have an opportunity to not have to deal with Porter. But let's ask yourself a question. Let's suppose in the application was made not by Porter, but by Air Canada, or by WestJet, or both. That would change the minds of people, because it's not that little airport that grew anymore. It is now clearly an international airport with international carriers operating an airport the same size as the one in Ottawa. And that's why you should understand, and the way we should see it, is that this is about an international airport on the waterfront. Air Canada and WestJet have made no secret of the fact that they will be there. In fact, their competitive needs will drive them there as Porter proceeds. So that's why. Former mayor was right, Paul's right, Jack will be right. There is no common sense to it. There is an ambition, and it's a laudable ambition by an entrepreneur, but we're not talking about the just desserts of an entrepreneur. We're talking about the quality of life in this city on its waterfront, and it's up to us to make sure that this proposal does not succeed.
And last but not least.
Thank you. You have to cast your minds back. Excuse me. You have to cast your minds back and think about the Toronto's waterfront over the last 100 years. It was an industrial waterfront. It's not easy to shift a city's focus, and we've begun to do that, to the tune of investing $1.26 billion of public monies in that improvement. Waterfront Toronto is doing an extraordinary job of doing that conversion from a waterfront that was unreachable for any other use than for transportation, shipping and trains and coal yards. So that's a huge shift. Why would we want to go back? Why would we want to reintroduce a major industrial function on a waterfront that is obviously beginning to achieve what the best cities in the world do provide, and that is a waterfront that's accessible to everyone and has every kind of use on it? So to me, the general thrust of this is profoundly wrong. Second of all, you have to understand the dynamic of this shift. In 2006, there were 23,000 passengers who used the Toronto airport, the island airport. Now, there are 2.3 million passengers that use that airport. And if the expansion were to take place, there'd be between 3 and 4 million passengers using that airport. So the shift from the utilization of it, of a friendly, amenable, attractive waterfront, to a major airport, clearly is in conflict. The curious thing is it's public monies that are being used to improve it, and private monies that are being used to harm it. So I think that the City Council responsibility is to the large public good. We have to see to it that the responsibility with the public leadership is in our favor, not a particular interest. Curious how many Torontonians and our leadership go to Chicago to admire their waterfront. What did Mayor Daley do? And it wasn't a large commercial airport. It was a small airport for pleasure craft. He ripped it out because he knew it's better as a park than as an airport. I'm interested in that in every lease that you sign when you rent space, either for a condominium or an apartment or leasing it for a commercial, there's a little phrase in it that you sign with the landlord. You are to enjoy or have quiet enjoyment of your premises. I think Torontonians need quiet enjoyment of our premises. My sense is that this is, as has been said already, but I put it in another way, this is a Trojan horse. Beware them bringing us gifts with more planes that haven't been seen yet but will be seen. That's all I have to say.
Okay, I'd like to thank the panelists for that introduction. So I'm going to do a little experiment, so you'll indulge me. In journalism, we always try to practice full disclosure, so I'm going to tell you that I've flown out of the island airport 3 times, twice for business, once for pleasure. So I'd like to see a show of hands. Everyone be honest. Who's flown out of the island airport? Oh, that's a pretty big crowd for this group. So a show of hands, why did you like the coffee? Free coffee? And what about the convenience? Is the convenience an important factor? Okay, less than half. What about the choice of destinations? And what about the view from taking off and landing? Okay, one hand up there. So even in this crowd, we have a pretty good take-up of patrons of Porter or perhaps the other. Okay, all right. Okay, who flew Porter? Okay, sir. So I have a political question for the one politician on our panel, and I'm going to use as a point of departure the Environics poll that accompanied the staff report that went to the executive committee last week, and it had some pretty interesting data. And findings, and I'll just read out a couple of them for those of you who haven't read them. So it found that 47% strongly or somewhat supported jets at the island airport, 45% strongly or somewhat opposed jets at the island airport. So essentially a tie. 6% mixed feelings. So that's those are like the swing voters in the United States. We have some contradictory results. 60% felt that they improved transit could alleviate traffic. 36% didn't agree. 51% said major cities need airports close to the core, and 45% disagreed. So we have a kind of mixed public opinion on this subject. So my question to the former mayor of Toronto, who was not the mayor of the amalgamated city, is how do you move more people into the contra set, because there are a lot of people in the city who never come to the waterfront and who, for whom this is all basically an abstraction.
It is an abstraction to most people, or to many people. But I think the more people you bring to the waterfront, the more talk there is, the more meetings there are, the more media focus on it, the more discussion, then you'll bring people around. There are a couple points that I was trying to make, or a point that I was trying to make, which I think will move some people. There is a nice feeling by some people about the Porter airline. And you have to, I think those who sort of feel it's about bad people, about Porter being the bad guy, I think that's not going to be very helpful, because you can be written off. I would try and focus on what is going to be the impact on the waterfront and the future of Toronto. Sorry? And Jack, that's right. Jack was mentioning earlier, we spent an enormous amount of time, a big crank in this city to move away from the industrial waterfront. This is in danger of taking us back. So it is, I think, getting the facts out. Joel was talking earlier about the environmental issue, the water meets the shore, and so on. I mean, all of that is a beautiful thing, and the waterfront trail is there for people to see it, and I know she's walked it. But I think there are the amassing of facts that allow people to say, this thing is just too damn big for the waterfront, and therefore it needs to be defeated slowly. People will begin to understand why. Some people will be affected by environmental issues. There are lots of those. Some people will be affected by economic development issues and the loss of jobs and the waste of investment that we've already put in. For me, I think a lot of people will understand if they say, I don't think we expected to have the Ottawa International Airport on the waterfront. I don't think that fits. And I think I use the subway every day whenever Ann Golden allows me, if I say that to people, they say, yeah, we don't want an airport that size. Are they against a little airport? That's okay.
Okay. Jack, you wanted to add something?
Well, we're all forgetting the fact of how to move people. By 2015, there'll be a rail link to the airport from downtown Toronto. As the Waterfront Toronto put it, and I'll read you from their report, simply put, if we damage our waterfront, the harm is permanent. We only have one waterfront. We do, however, have another airport. And so the point is that the convenience issue, the congestion issue, and the more traffic that invades a neighborhood, the worse the neighborhood, clearly. So there's a solution at hand, not in some abstract future. It's under construction. So by 2015, the convenience argument is gone. We don't have to destroy the school to put parking in because you'll take the train to the airport.
Okay, so let me throw that one back at you. So for the last several years, we've heard from communities along the Union Pearson Rail corridor say that the diesel fumes that are going to come from those trains are going to negatively affect the communities that live, the people who live in that corridor. So, and I think that's true for highways. So if you use the highway, I take the Allen and 401, 409 out to Pearson. If you use that highway, you're affecting people who live in those neighborhoods. So is this not a question of shifting the environmental impact from one community to another? Jane, would you like to tackle that?
Ditto on that. But I mean, I think that first of all, we don't know all the details yet. I think it's fair to say of what these jets will bring in the fine print. But we do know the large strokes. And I think it's fair to say that the large strokes are that these jets will bring particulates. And the particulates will extend not just to downtown, but into and across the waterfront from one end to the other. And so, I mean, I'm not going to get into a debate about what has more emissions. All I know at this point is that is quite a serious health issue. And it's one that the medical officer of health has been very firm on. And he said, listen, folks, let's get your situation under control. We don't even know what it is right now, Toronto Port Authority, in terms of where we are with admissions, in terms of health impact. We suspect it's a great health impact. Let's get that under control before we up the ante with significant admissions that will go all across our waterfront that our kids will be breathing for generations.
Thank you. So I have a planning question for the planner. So the airport lands are designated under the official plan that you wrote as parkland, and presumably the idea there is that in 2033, when the tripartite agreement expires, this provides the opportunity for that landfill to return to another use. So one of the points that was brought up by the Urban Strategies report, which is an appendix to the Executive Committee report, which is a great report to read, by the way, is a recommendation that this land be designated as an airport. We should not try to sort of game out the future and then deal with the land use planning issues that arise from formally recognizing its role. How do you address that?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and let me just try and break it down this way. First of all, it's very important for everyone to understand that zoning prevails, not the official plan, zoning. That's what you get. The zoning says you can have a use or do it, that's what you can do. The official plan comes into effect when you want to change the zoning to something else. So that's my first point. And the zoning is there to allow for this airport to exist under the terms that I specified in my short presentation that are in the official plan that says airport operations comply with tripartite. Any improvements, expansion must address the adverse impacts. So I think I've covered that off in the official plan. The second point I'll have to say this is one thing I've learned, and I made reference to this. Council is going to make a 100-year decision, in my view, when this goes before them. I don't know what's going to happen 50 years from now, 100 years from now. Jack's made reference to 100 years in the past in terms of when the Portlands were filled in with, Commissioner Street and the Keating Channel and all that. The fact of the matter is, maybe over a very long period of time, things will change drastically. So my frank planning position is it does no harm to keep those lands designated that way because there's a site-specific policy in the plan that governs the existing condition and spells out what needs to be addressed in any expansion and any impacts.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so I have a question about development for Jack. So I've been covering city planning for a long time, and I've heard a lot of people say that that certain developments are going to wreck the development opportunities downstream, or certain features of the city are going to make development impossible. A great example is the Gardner. But we have an enormous amount of development in the downtown core. It develops right up to the edge of the Gardner. People buy condos and buildings that are a few meters away from the highway. So my question to you is, why would this pattern not continue? We have the ability in the city, for whatever reason, to create development in places that you might think are utterly inhospitable.
Well, I think that one of the objections that the previous waterfront development had was the extent of the density along the waterfront. I think that was it was exacerbated by the fact that they weren't particularly distinguished buildings, to put it mildly. And I think that in fact the public access to the waterfront has been ensured. And curiously, it's in the greatest cities that are on the waterfront, it's often much more intimate and tighter than what we're doing. Ours is on a rather grand scale. So I think that it's a possibility of having high density. It's a question of how it's deployed. And the way it's being deployed, in fact, has two problems. One, there's insufficient hard and soft infrastructure to support it. Parks, clinics, schools, libraries, transportation, all of that. So I don't think that we actually have the foundation to sustain a continuance of the levels of density that we're building. I'm not objecting to the density per se. I think it's the way it's distributed, the way it is handled on the street, and the supportive structure. When you put all that in place, then you can talk about how much. Right now, we don't have the support for it that justifies it.
Okay. So now I'd like to ask a question about transit. And again, I'm going to cite the appendices to the staff report. There was an assessment of different kinds of solutions to the traffic problems at the on Eran Quay, excuse me. And so there's a range of solutions. Some of them are inexpensive, basically changing the turn signage and better streetcar stops. There's one possibility of driving that pedestrian tunnel all the way to the north end of Norway Park, and some ideas about extending transit right down to the bottom of the quay. And so my question to Mayor Crombie is this: do we have an opportunity here to connect the transit agenda to the existence of the current airport, and as a way of ameliorating the traffic congestion in that area, which is getting really bad?
I wish I could give you the answer. I think it's an excellent question, and I think that two people on either side of me are more apt to give you a better answer than I can. I mean, I don't know.
I'd like you to talk about the politics of that, because I mean, we have a political debate about transit financing and transit spending, and expanding the transit infrastructure. So is there a political case to be made to connect the notion of expanding transit
along the waterfront?
Along the waterfront to deal with the traffic congestion created by the airport?
Sure. I mean, there's no doubt that one of the problems with transportation along the waterfront for a long time has been inadequate transit. Now, it's obviously in sections and pieces and parts, but if you take the whole of the waterfront, we have not put the investment in that's required. I was just at an event dealing with the future of Ontario Place, and unless they get some transit over to Ontario Place, they can plan and develop all they like. You can't get there. So is there a political argument? There absolutely is, and there's more and more people. I know that there's questions of density and too many condos or something, but there are more and more people on the waterfront. You now have a constituency on the waterfront that you didn't have before. So to talk about investment in public transit before was more a planner's thought than it was a daily reality for people living there. So do I think that there's a constituency for public transit? Yes, of course. And that will continue because the waterfront is developing apace. Most people don't spend a lot of time on the waterfront. They drive by it in the Gardiner, and their views of the waterfront are taken from that perspective. I walk it a lot, and I walk a good length of it. And it's absolutely splendid development that's been going on for the last decade. But in order for it to work, there needs to be a public transit strategy, and I have no doubt that politically it can be done.
Paul, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I do. I totally agree, and I think the Central Waterfront Plan that I outlined before was based on the fundamental, this thing keeps coming back, fundamental premise that transit had to be there to service that density and that development. Now, with respect to your specific question about streetcar service and transit service right to the airport, I think there's a fundamental choice that has to be made here. And it.
Can you?
Sorry.
You know what, maybe use David.
Oh, all right. Yeah, we're getting echoes here. Is this better now? Jeez, I don't know what we're doing here.
Do you want to try this one?
All right.
I think the problem's you, Paul.
I think so. I'm going to try it.
Get it right closer.
I'll try again. How's that? Okay. No, absolutely it has to happen, but there's a fundamental choice that has to take place, and that is you got to take away some road space to give priority to transit. That's the short answer. That's the truth. The reality is that if you try to accommodate all the density and all the growth on the Central Waterfront by roads alone, it's impossible. Can't do it. And we acknowledged that in the Central Waterfront Plan 10 years ago. And quite frankly, that transit hasn't happened. It hasn't come forward. And as we all know, Queens Quay Boulevard is going through a multi-year redesign now that'll be finally finished in 2015. It's going to have the streetcar back down the middle, on the one side of the right-of-way. The road's going to be narrowed, huge, wide pedestrian corridors, street trees, all those things. That is really the right direction to go in. So in answer to your question, can we get transit right to the airport down Bathurst Quay? Yeah, of course we can, if we make the space for it and the political will is there to deliver it.
Good.
Oh, good, some debate.
Okay, we'll go for questions in a minute. Okay, Jane, I'd like to ask you this question. So there was an engineering study done on the airport, which on the proposal to extend the runways, and it made several comments. One, it said that the proposed runway extensions, which are about 200 meters on either end, would have a minimal and limited, and I'm quoting from the CH2M Hill report, effect on coastal and marine processes, and have some effect on aquatic habitats. It also pointed out that the problem of jet blasts could be mitigated with deflectors that would send the sound up. So I'd like you to. Okay, so this is the staff report, and so I'd like you to address those. Do those findings, based on your research, make sense, or do they sound like? I mean, this is a technical analysis.
Well, I can say in writing along the shore safely that I never really contemplated the prospect of advancing and filling in the bay any farther. My book was really, I think, celebrates the areas of the waterfront that have remained connected, and I saw the island as one of those areas. So, of course, historically, I talk about the airport, about Port George the 6th airport and the other various advancements and development. But certainly, in terms of these other issues, it just, for me anyways, goes from the sublime to the ridiculous now that we're going to be building various devices as answers to this, including, I think, did you mention a baffle, or did maybe Councillor Adam Vaughan mentioned that? I saw you the other day on television, and you know, they're cold comfort, quite frankly, to the whole debate. And I think even it's fair to say the city report, even the city solicitors in the city report is saying, look, we need more time to study this. So effectively speaking, I think the city report and what comes out of that is it's let's not do anything on this precipitously. Let's wait till at least 2015 till we have a lot more information in. And you know, one thing I'm willing to bet, that during these next number of months and years until 2015, if that's the way it goes, we're going to get some more ridiculous suggestions come forward in terms of how we might all be able to live, actually live, with jets and many jets that will come in as a result of this on our waterfront. But it's my position, and I think many people here, that we shouldn't have to do that. We shouldn't have to live with that as a compromise.
So I'm going to ask a couple more questions, but if anyone who wants to ask a question, if you have a very loud voice, you can shout it out, or if you'd like to come down here and I'll give you my mic. So why don't we, people who want to come down, I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'll take some questions from the floor, and we're going to alternate male-female. So the last question, I'm going to leave it open to all of you, and it's this question about whether or not the airport and its tenants make money. And so there's a lot of dispute about this point. Some people will say that Porter is a money-losing operation and it's eventually going to just run out of steam. Other people will say that the growth that it's experiencing is evidence that this is an increasing market, a growing market, and an increasingly profitable market that the other carriers want to get into. So which one is it? Do we know whether Porter and the other airlines down there are making money off this facility? Anyone who wants to go first?
Do we know whether or not Porter's making money?
Well, we don't know that, but what do you? I'm interested in getting your views on whether or not Porter is onto something viable commercially, or whether the predictions that there are always predictions that it's going out of business.
The second point I was offering in my presentation was that they are trying to now enter into a competitive field. It is the field of Air Canada and WestJet, and whatever the money to be made is or is not, Air Canada and WestJet feel impelled. They will say so, impelled to now participate. Which is why, when it comes to approving this particular plan, it can even be larger, because when it comes to trying to divvy up the slots for the flights, you're going to find that their easiest way is going to be to continue to expand the airport. So there should be no mystery in anybody's mind that there is going to be a competitive environment that is bringing Air Canada and WestJet into this mix. They're already in there. They're already announcing that they're and working their way into a proposition that says, look, remember, the airport is not, the airport is a public asset. It's not a private preserve of Porter. So that's why I was saying earlier, it's important really to understand this is not about Porter. This is about waterfront and the airline industry.
Yeah, I just want to say one further thing. I have no idea if Porter's making money or not, but I'm very concerned of the shift in focus from the briefcase traveler to the vacation traveler. And as I said earlier, that's an entirely different market. And I've read some articles, maybe you have too, in the paper where, you know, maybe they've maxed out the briefcase traveler market, I have no idea, and they're moving to the leisure, the vacation traveler, That's why Caribbean, LA, Florida, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have to tell you, if you're going to Florida for a week or two with your family, you take a lot of luggage generally. And probably you'll drive and you want to park there. And it's an entirely different market and different set of ground implications in terms of impacts for Bathurst Key and for the Central Waterfront. So I'm very concerned about that, and I think there's something in that shift that they're making, and that concerns me even more. I just want to say one last thing, John, that I'm also, David and I were talking here, I'm concerned. It's great, it's a wonderful crowd here. Everybody is by and large saying the same thing. I'm concerned that we don't talk about the specific actions and specific areas that need to be addressed by everybody to move this agenda forward.
Okay, so Jane or Jack, do you want to address this last one?
Reinforce Paul's point about organization. I was very fortunate to be involved in a successful battle against the casino. And it started with two wonderful ladies in their living room in Etobicoke. Some good things come out of Etobicoke. So I urge people to really get involved, to see to it that councillors get the pressure, because it's a numbers game. You've got to see to it that enough calls are made, enough signs are put up, enough money is contributed to the NoJets so that they have the money to buy the signs and to sign up the petitions. So it really is important that this group become the core of that thrust to make it publicly unacceptable for a municipal councillor to vote for it.
Okay, so I'm going to take some questions. This gentleman was first, and then you're next. So just the ground rules, short, direct question, and direct it, and say who you want to talk to.
To Crombie, how do we make this an election issue for the 2014 election so we can educate the public on the long-term ramifications of the waterfront versus corporate interests?
Thank you. Sorry, I was listening to Jack in the other ear, but I think I got it. What can we do for the election coming up? Because actually January is the opening shot, I guess, for the election now. And it's I don't think it's changed much, except social media has changed some things. It is really important that people participate in campaigns. It's important we have candidates speaking on the issues. It's important that we talk to current councillors, incumbents, make sure we know where they are. My guess is that it'll still be a live issue by that time. So I think it really is an important one. I think we have to also, behind all the hands-on work that needs to be done that both Paul and Jack talked about, I think we need to make sure that we're articulating a message that is really clear and forthright and honest. Otherwise, if it gets too long and there are too many points, I have the following 17 points, people just turn off. So I think we have to really articulate a message that doesn't look like we're trying to get angry at but we're dealing with the issue itself, and we can do that, I think, with some good coherent word merchanting, and then put people with their hands on to work. Elections are still the same as they've always been. People go out and vote. People get motivated by a vote. They get motivated by their neighbors, get motivated by the groups they belong to. If this crowd, people in this crowd, decided they were going to convince 30 people they don't know right now, that would be an enormous advance, because if you talk to people in other parts of the city, it's that simple. You don't have to just talk to 20 then. 20 people you don't know, and talk to them about it in other parts of the city. And you need to spread it like that. It's that simple. And now with social media, it's a lot easier.
As urban planners, how would you publicize the effect of the expanded fuel farms? So that with the CS100s, they use twice as much fuel, the footprint of the airport's going to change, and already they're trucking massive quantities of fuel through these neighborhoods. So is there a possibility that you can provide that research, or do you know of research in relation to fuel farms in urban centers? And how can we publicize that as part of our campaign?
Maybe I could take a stab at that. I think the medical officer of health addressed that issue in his report that just came out recently. And obviously the safety issue is primary in terms of that volume of jet fuel being trucked through a dense neighborhood past the school, community center, et cetera. Everyone remembers the propane explosion of a couple of years ago. And, you know, nobody wants a disaster to ever happen, but the reality is that risk is much higher. And I think those facts just have to come out as part of David's strategy here.
Say something?
Yes, I wanted to turn that question around to what David has just said about the clear message. You know, when there's a sufficient change in degree, there's a change in kind. When things get to a tipping point, they become something different. I think the message that David and you and others are trying to convey is that we're not talking about a little airport. We're talking about a major factor. They're projecting themselves 4.8 million people with the expansion passengers. You can supplement it by the whole issue about jet fuel and traffic congestion. People have to understand that what we have to convey is that this is a different animal. It's not a little airport with somebody taking a joyride in a single engine craft for fun. This is a major issue that's going to spoil our waterfront. That's the message to convey.
I would like to ask how we can spread the word, what sorts of resources we have to combat the blizzard of advertising that has been put forward, not only by Porter, but also by the Toronto Port Authority, which is funded by the federal government. In other words, by us as taxpayers, we are paying for these full-page ads in the papers. Those are largely what people are referring to most. I think there's some simple messages to be put across. One is this is not about Porter alone. It's not about a single tripartite agreement. It's going to involve not only WestJet and Air Canada, but you can bet your last dime that as soon as it is expanded, the Americans will be in there. And you talk about market forces. I did ask a question actually. How are we going to raise the funds to counter this advertising and the misinformation that is being spread?
I mean, Paul said the answer, one word to answer back, it's not two words, is people power. You can have all the ads in the world. Look at Jack was talking about the casino. There was an enormous amount of money spent on advertising about the casino. There was hardly a consultant walking the street who wasn't somehow on somebody's payroll for it, except for Jack, of course. And the only reason I mention that, it was a people power response. It was not a slick campaign out against it. You can beat a slick campaign. It has to have a cogent message, clear and simple, and it has to have a lot of hands, and there have to be interesting ways in which the message gets out, which you should turn over to at least an organizing committee of thinkers who say, these are the kind of strategies. So it's a full-blown campaign. That's what it requires, and that requires people, ideas, and money, and dedication. And dedication. Jack says.
Dedication of a few.
Actually, it is true. You need to have that small core of people who are willing to put their life into it. Okay. Well, great. Then all we need to do is to expand no jets. All right. But I would say, quite frankly, I've said it twice now and was mentioned again, this is not about turning Porter into the bad guy. If you do that, you may feel good, but I'm telling you, this is about the waterfront and the blot that can come from the waterfront from that size of facility on the waterfront. That's what we're talking about. Because at the end of the day, it will not be about Porter. It will be about the airline industry and the waterfront.
There's one solution to getting out to Pearson Airport that I don't think I've heard about. You talk about getting on the 401 in your car. When I have to go to Pearson Airport, a very easy way is this light, the color transit.
Yeah,
Terrible. A very easy way to get out there is on the TTC. For your TTC ticket, you go to Kipling, and there's a rocket bus that takes you right out to the airport. The whole trip is 40 minutes from downtown, and that's the way I go if I have to go to an airport. I mostly take trains if I have to. But I wanted to say that because I think that's a wonderful solution that already exists, and lots of people use it. If you go out there, you see people with their big suitcases going out there, and it's cheap, it's easy, and it exists already. So I just wanted to ask why that hasn't been proposed tonight.
Why not better TTC transit service to the airport? Should that be part of the mix?
To the island airport, I assume the question is, or to Pearson?
The questioner was asking whether the TTC should provide, or whether people should use more TTC service to Pearson.
Yeah, no, that's how I go.
I know it exists.
That's how I go all the time. For $2.75, my God, you get downtown to Pearson, right? And a lot of people use it, but not everybody knows about it. So no question there should be new options. As we all know, 2015, there'll be the Union to Pearson link, which is priority number 1 to be electrified. And the reality is those choices are, some are there now, and there'll be more in the future. There's no question there should be better access, and there will be.
I find myself getting angrier and angrier in trying to address these issues because what I feel is unaddressed here is the elephant in the room. And that elephant is the Toronto Port Authority, who has no port, but is always looking for more authority. And they've broken the back of every city plan that we've had for the waterfront. I remember when south of Queens Quay, there was going to be no development. They built it. The very first building, Harbor Square, Harbor Castle, and the ferry docks is a little present for the city. They created and infilled the Leslie Street Spit, which was intended to be the new airport. Many people may not know that, but look at the configuration of it. And fortunately, when they were not looking, nature took over, yay, and foiled those plans. Now they have a cement campus, it's called, all around the shipping channel. They don't have a port, but their survival depends entirely on this airport. And how can we address this when we don't, this is just a handful of people that are almost robber barons. They don't have any of real authority, do they? But they're, no matter what happens, they are reshaping our waterfront constantly. And I don't know if this is a question for you, Paul, or for David, who experienced this during his term.
I'll take a shot at it, Sarah. First of all, the Port Authority is appointed by the federal government. It's a successor, of course, as you know, from the Old Harbor Commission, which died in 1999. Sarah points out that what does it actually do? It doesn't have a real live port, and we've only had a toy port now. It's all we've had for the last 30 years. Sorry? Fair enough. Interesting point about why it's considered useless, at least by federal bureaucrats, is that when they switched over from the Harbor Commission to the Port Authority, the transport officials or bureaucrats listed the 18 ports that would become port authorities, and the others would go to the municipalities. The government of the day had people in their caucus from Toronto who held up that legislation until Toronto became the 19th port on the list. And so it was there's a it's a cautionary tale because it tells you a truth about the Port Authority. It has no real purpose. It is a federal government patronage sandbox.
And who was the government of the day, David?
The government of the day was the Liberal government. Just to make sure we're understanding all sides of the street.
One quick piece of advice for everybody: if you get angry, you're not going to get anywhere. You have to be rational, calm, and collected, or people won't listen. If you yell, they won't listen to you. One quick question for our moderator: how do we get more attention from particularly the print media, in the face of those big Porter ads that are there all the time?
I can't speak for the media. Do something newsworthy, we'll report on it.
I would like to raise an issue that has not been addressed. It has to do with truth and reconciliation. Idle no more. The islands are sacred land to the First Nations. I do not speak for the First Nations people, but I know that one of their leaders has particularly recently been saying, "We are still here." Toronto is not addressing that. I think that NoJetsTO is relating to that, but I think it is something that I would like at least one member of the panel to address. Thank you.
Is it Madeline? Yeah, it's Madeline. Hi, Madeline. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. I haven't seen Madeline for a bit. She's the lady who keeps the Humber worthwhile. Madeline also has a long and obvious interest in Aboriginal affairs, and she is right. Actually, the Toronto purchase is now finished. It was completed without great fanfare in 2010 for $147 million after 200 years of struggle. But not included, perhaps, was the Toronto Islands, which was the holy ground, which, of course, weren't islands in those days. We weren't islands until 1856 or 7. Aboriginal interest, of course, right along the waterfront still exists with the Mississauga of the New Credit, and Chief Brian Laforme is still interested in having a museum, having remembrance, putting up the signs for the names of all the places along the lake, which were knocked out by Simcoe when he put in English names and knocked out the Aboriginal names. There is still alive an Aboriginal interest, and for those who take an interest in that, please let me know. I'll direct you to some people who can fill your hearts with interest on Aboriginal life, still by Aboriginal people in the city. Okay, that's the best I can do, Madeline.
My name is Susan Swan. I'm an author. I live in the middle of the city. And I know that the media may or may not come if we do organize more protests. But what I'd really like to see, with all due respect to John, is some serious investigative reporting by the Toronto newspapers on the effects of the expansion of the airport and the airport. Give us some of that wonderful Toronto Star investigative journalism on Rob Ford, and bring it to the airport and what's happening to the air and the water down there. I want to know, and we don't know, and it makes me really mad. Thank you.
I've got a couple of questions which I think would interest the electorate out there that don't know about it. And it's Councillor Vaughan brought up a couple of issues at the last subcommittee meeting at Council. And one of them, he talked about a wall having to be built, a 15 meters. And I was wondering if he could expand on that. And the other thing was he seemed to be keeping track of costs, which were getting up into the hundreds of millions. That's to the taxpayers. And I was wondering if he could talk a minute about that. I mean, those are huge to taxpayers. And I didn't understand what the wall was going to be.
Okay, I'm going to invite Councillor Vaughan to come and answer those questions.
First of all, hats off to NoJetsTO. I am stunned. This is a huge crowd. A huge crowd. And when you talk about two people in an Etobicoke living room deciding to change the world, a couple of folks in a condominium along the waterfront are doing just the same work, and my hat off to them. It's amazing to see this kind of a turnout. The two issues you spoke about, one was spoken to earlier. There is a need to deflect not just the noise, but the jet blast, because there's no taxiing capacity on the runway, and when the planes turn around, they have to exit. They have to basically surge their engines. That jet blast is and there's someone coming up to talk about it soon, I think, but that jet blast is phenomenal. It basically is like a gale force wind that will knock little boats right off their moorings, if not over into the water. And so it's a very serious issue. What they're contemplating is about a 36-meter wall, which is almost as high as the screen there, for a significant portion of the 250-meter extensions on each end of the runway. And when I say 250, everyone's talking about the 200 meters of usable runway, but there's also a 50-meter safety apron, which will be a requirement very soon out of Transport Canada. So it's a half a kilometer of extension either way into the runway. So that wall will have to shield a significant part of that on the north side of the runway in particular. And so when you look from the Music Garden or from even Harbourfront, the stage at Harbourfront Centre, you will not see the islands anymore. You'll see a 36-meter wall in the inner harbour, and you'll see a 36-meter wall in the outer harbour. It's a significant issue. The second issue is the cost, and the costs have been quoted. They've been bounced around about $100 million to put the streetcar right down to the ferry terminal. Well, that's if you do it all on the surface, but that doesn't include losing the sunk costs currently in Queens Quay right now and reconfiguring the intersection and taking part of the schoolyard away. It's not just $100 million of track. There's hundreds of millions of dollars more in real estate acquisition, environmental assessments, and a reconfiguration. But the proposal that's actually put in front by the transportation folks is to effectively build St. Clair West subway station, where the malting silos are, which is about a $300 million cost, and then to tunnel it up onto the street, which is about another $160 million. And that's not included in the transportation costs, which are in front of us. There's also a requirement that's now become very apparent to put a new sanitary sewer from the airport onto the mainland, because right now glycol and the de-icing fluid is being spilled into the lake. It's also being spilled into the storm sewer, and it's not being contained the way, even close to the standards we have at Pearson. That's a hugely expensive proposition, probably $30 to $75 million. When you start totaling this all up, what you get to very quickly is about $500 million in costs, some identified in the reports, some not identified in the reports. And Deleuze has said, at first he said, I might pay for that, I will pay for it, then he said, I won't pay for it. The Port Authority has said that people have said the Port Authority should pay for that, but under their federal charter, they're not allowed to pay for non-airport and non-Port Authority infrastructure. That has to be paid for by the local government. Plus that, the cost of building the runway, the cost of extending the runway by half a kilometer, plus reinforcing it to take planes that are twice as heavy, plus their share of the cost of expanding the fuel tank, changing the configuration of the airport, adding a new couple of hangars to stage these jets. All of that is also got to be leveraged off the ticket. So when you add it all up, we're trying to get a figure on it, but it's getting closer and closer, not to $500 million, but closer to $1 billion when you fold in the airport piece of it. That $1 billion is now what is being negotiated between Norm Kelly, who is a lifelong fan of the airport, and was one of the architects behind the Marine Act being changed to include this as a federal port, and Lisa Raitt, a former general manager of the Port Authority, who's now the Minister of Transport. And the fear we have in Toronto is that close to whether it's $500 million or $1 billion in federal money, which will be required to be put into the city, will effectively be the $1 billion of infrastructure money, which you actually need for housing and for new subways and for a whole series of other infrastructure upgrades. And so we'll surrender the future of the city to the operations of one very small ambition. And that's the problem we're having, is that there's no way of costing this out or leveraging this off the airline tickets. It's going to require a federal infrastructure donation to the city, and right now that money is badly needed in a host of other areas. It is a really bad plan. Every time you look at this plan, it gets bigger, it gets more complicated, but it gets more expensive. And you cannot put Ottawa International Airport on a piece of land a seventh the size without those infrastructure costs. It's impossible, and that's the fight. It's not about the noise, never has been. This plane doesn't exist. We don't know what the noise of it is. It's not about Porter, I agree. It's never been about Porter. It's about an air, I think someone said it at the subcommittee of Toronto East York the other day perfectly well. This is not about an airline expansion. This is about an airport expansion, and this airport does not fit where they want to put it and will overwhelm the waterfront, and it must be stopped.
Okay, so I apologize. We've run out of time for questions. I'd like to thank the panel, and I'm going to hand it over to Anshu.
Sorry about that, guys. We have a strict timeline to be out of here by a certain amount. But a couple of things that are clear. There's a reason why we named ourselves NoJetsTO. We didn't call ourselves No Porter TO or Stop the Airport or anything like that. Because the fight is not against Porter. The fight is not against an airline. The fight is against jets and expansion. NoJetsTO does not stand for the closure of the airport. It stands for the stop and stopgap of stopping this expansion. We also know what's at stake. It's our waterfront. It's our lifestyle. It's our health. It's our money. Investment that will come into this airport, whether it's federal, whether it's provincial, whether it's municipal, will be our taxpayer dollars. And do we want our taxpayer dollars to go to the pockets of one entity? But we know what it'll take to win, but we need your help to do it. And what do you need to do? As Mayor Crombie put it quite eloquently, is every person in this room gets 30 more people to say no to jets and no to expansion. We will win. We had a small victory last week when they deferred the motion because they knew they were going to lose. And we had a great victory today when Board of Health said, no, this doesn't make sense. And whenever Deputy Mayor Kelly wants to bring this to Executive Council and wants to bring this to Council, we will make sure we win there. But we can't do it without you. We need you to call your councillors. We need to call your friends. If you haven't signed the petition on our website, www.nojetsto.ca, please do so. And if you haven't got a lawn sign, there were tons here, but they're gone now because people are getting them. But we can get more. But every single part of that, this room, the lawn signs, the website, every single part of that costs money. And unfortunately, I'm not Robert Deleuze. Not that I want to be him, but I do not have the pockets that he does. And we do not have the pockets that we do. We're putting in our volunteer time to do that. So my ask to you is, now Jane was great to give us this book. But if I get this signed by every single panelist, and as well as John over there, who's willing to give me $100 for this? All right, who's willing to give me $2? I have $2, $250, $225, $215. I'll go on a downgrade scale. We have $250? $250, that's awesome. Thank you very much. Remember, when you look back in 2013, you remember 2013 to be the year that the casino was stopped. 2013 will be the year that the jets were stopped. And 2013 will be the year where young people like me got up and said, no, it doesn't make sense. $250, last ask. Would anyone say 300? 300. You're awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much. If you guys haven't donated, if you haven't bought a T-shirt, if you haven't given the money, please do so. We need the money. Porter Airlines is buying full-page ads in every single newspaper. There's 4? Oh, there's a bucket. There's a bucket out there. If you haven't, there's PayPal on our site. Please do donate. I'm going to get the panelists to sign this if I could get a pen. And we have it for, what was it, $6,000? What was that? Well, thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much for making this a success. And the media was here, and they finally covered us. And that's thanks to you guys. Thank you, and have a safe ride home in TTC or however you came.